So I've created another storage account for this demo. Now this storage account is a read access globally redundant storage. And we're going to see in a second what that means. Now if we look at it quickly, I've created a blob account with a single container called new and a single file called test.html inside of it. Now if we go into the properties of this storage account, scroll down a bit, we can see that there are both primary and secondary endpoints. Because this is globally redundant storage and read access storage, that means there are actually a master endpoint and then the read access endpoint. So I can use this endpoint if the first one ever becomes down or unavailable. Now all of the services within the storage account have this public endpoint. So the blob storage, files, queues, tables, etc. Now don't get alarmed, and that doesn't mean that necessarily your storage is open to the public. This is a private storage account. What makes it secure is that you require a access key in order to get access to the storage account. So simply going to this URL without the access key isn't going to get you anything, and we'll demonstrate that in a second. If we go into the access keys section, we can see the access keys we're talking about. So Azure gives us two keys by default. You can see them listed as key 1 and key 2. If you have either one of these keys, then you can get access to this storage account, full, complete access. This is a master key and there's no restriction on it. If your key was ever to get leaked or got released into the wrong hands, you can basically invalidate it by regenerating it. So there's this regenerate button. I'm going to click it. And this key, the one that was there before, has now changed, and the previous key no longer works to access the storage account. So Azure recommends that you only use one of the keys at a time, and then if you ever need to change it, you can switch over to the second key and invalidate the first. Because if you invalidate this key while somebody is using it, it's going to basically, that program will stop working immediately. So this is why you always have a primary and a backup, and then if you ever need to switch, the backup becomes the primary. So the keys is not actually the recommended approach for accessing a storage account. So perhaps if you're using a development environment or your own personal use or a very small limited environment, you can certainly use the access keys embedded in your program. But in a production setting, an enterprise setting, when you've got lots of eyes and lots of hands on it, these keys are powerful. And if it ever gets released, it could cause you to have a bad day. So the recommended way of sharing access to a storage account to programs or to other individuals is not through keys, but through something called a shared access signature. And we'll switch over to the shared access signature. A shared access signature is effectively a token that you can generate signed by one of your keys that you can then hand to someone. That token is going to have limited permissions on it, and you can set the limits, and we'll look at that. So for instance, we can set the limits to only the blob account and not access to the queue, table, and file. We can give the person only read access but not write, delete, or add or create. List access is good for containers, so you can see the contents of the container. We can specify start and end dates and times for this. This looks like about 20 hours by default, but I can certainly change this to February instead of January and give it 30 days. We can also filter by IP address, so only certain systems and servers, maybe within your own environment, can access this, and you can even set the IP range. You can force a protocol, and here's where you specify which key is what's going to cryptographically sign this. So let's leave that with key 1. Now if I generate this shared access signature, we're given the connection string like normal in terms of using it in our code. We're given just the raw token, or we're given the combination, which is a URL. I'm going to copy this third one into my clipboard here. So now let's go back. We said earlier that we could use this public endpoint URL in order to access this file. Actually, I'm going to go into the overview, the containers, into the container itself and into the file, and we can even see on the properties of the file a way of accessing that file. So I just put the URL of that file into my browser, and you can see that it's /new/test.html, and it says a resource not found. And this is basically a message that says I do not have permissions to access this file. And I can even, this is HTTPS. So this file is giving us a permissions error because we're not using either the access key or a shared access signature to access it. Let me change this URL. And so now I'm going to put the /new/test.html file name, but I have the shared access key, shared access signature at the end of this URL. You can see that, that text. Now when I paste it, now we're getting the contents of the file. That's because our shared access signature grants us access to it. Now we're not going to be able to go and, once we've generated it, it's lost. And so we're not going to be able to go and see the shared access signature that we already created, but we can always create another one. We can create an unlimited number of them effectively. And again, this one that we did create only has read permissions. So this is how you use shared access signatures to grant others secure, limited access to your storage account instead of giving them your access keys.